he kicks the door in and immediately says, "I got a body." And you could see her legs sticking out from the half wall between the kitchen into the dining room. She was very, very dead. He had been torturing her for quite some time. He killed her about 30 seconds before we knocked on the door. So for like a month, I was a mess.
Today on Bets and Badges, we have the honor and privilege of introducing to you John Hill. He's a Gulf War veteran, retired assistant police chief of the Allentown Police Department, and our guest today. I am Robert Asencio, and next to me is my co-host, retired police chief, military historian, David Magnusson. Hey, David.
How you doing, Robert?
Oh, man. Doing well.
Good, good.
John.
Good.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So we had a little pre-conversation, right, about your military past.
Yes, sir.
So you were in the Marines. You were deployed to Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
During when Saddam Hussein and Iraq invaded the country of Kuwait. And you guys were the liberators. And we're talking about your experiences there. So you experienced some combat there. Can you share with us a little bit about that and what you saw and what it was like to be in that country?
Once Desert Shield transitioned over to Desert Storm and we left Saudi Arabia up into Kuwait, the first issue we had was the breach, getting through that massive trench system that he had set up, and the minefields. I mean, the number of mines that they put out was phenomenal, not in a good way, but the engineers would come out and blow a path through it, and then we would have to ride through it. So in whatever vehicle you're in, whether it's a truck, bus, Humvee, you would lean out the side and there's literally a mine about 2 feet, 3 feet off the track right next to you. And you have to drive through however many kilometers of this. And it was just insane. For the first, I don't know, day of this, it was just us trying to keep up with the armor. The problem the armor was running into was everybody was surrendering to them. They would fire three rounds into the ground and then just come running at them, and they didn't know whether they were surrendering or what they were doing. And then they would just throw themselves on the ground in front of whatever piece of armor it was, so that they would then send them back to us. And then it got to the point that they would just disarm them because they didn't have any means to transport them back to us. So they would just send them back as far as they could.
I remember on TV, the news networks, ABC that were embedded, NBC, and all the others. I remember seeing scenes of Iraqi soldiers surrendering to U.S. military soldiers.
It was intense. It was really intense.
So how's the impact of, like the trauma, what you saw, to you and your fellow troops?
Well, one of the things that I wasn't expecting, this is not combat related, but one of the things that I guess I wasn't mentally prepared for when I went to the desert were rats. I don't know why. I just didn't think that there would be rats there. There were, and you'd be, when you'd be rotating on and off your sleep schedules, they would be running through your hooch and running all over you. I woke up with one on my chest, sitting there tickling my nose. So my first night home, I go to bed, and my dog, I had a Belgian Malinois that I use with the sheriff's department, and he came over and tickled my nose from the edge of the bed. I freaked out, scared the crap out of my wife, scared the crap out of him. So that, I mean, again, not combat related. It was just, and to this day, if something, I don't do well with rats anymore.
And I suspect the sights and the sounds and the odor of.
Right. Well, that's the other one I was going to get to. Yeah. Odors are a big one. So because of the burning oil wells, petroleum smells, burning petroleum a lot of times will kind of get me going, which then when you look at law enforcement and you have car fires, which was common, I would often get that same kind of feeling wash over me. And it took a little while to recognize it and how to process it and what to do with it. The other one is burned people.
Mhm.
I knew that one bothered me a lot. And then when you'd end up going to house fires with work, I was less than functional. I would end up then just going a block away, and I would block traffic for the fire guys, because I wasn't much used to anything else at that point.
So let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind. Let's make this a little more conversational. David, jump in here. Let's talk a little bit about you. Let's let the audience learn a little bit about you. Maybe a couple 5 minutes or so of who is John Hill. Who is that masked man?
Probably the first thing that I like to think of is that I'm dad. I have 3 kids, a son. Actually, my first wife was pregnant with my son while I was in the Gulf. So, and for those of you that think you might miss all the mood swings when you're 10,000 miles away, no. You just get them in letters. So you'll get a 10-page letter and a different mood on each page. I got home 2 weeks before he was born. So I was not prepared. Yeah, so my son's my oldest, and then I have 2 daughters. And my youngest daughter, she has a grandson. Well, she has a son. My grandson is with my youngest daughter. After I got home from the Gulf, my contract had ended, so I separated from the Marine Corps.
What year was that?
91.
So then when did you come down to Allentown?
Started with Allentown in 93. Got laid off in 94 for 3.5 months. While she was pregnant with my first daughter.
Oh, that must have sucked.
That sucked. So, I mean, the great thing was the FOP picked up our COBRA benefits for our health insurance. So at least I didn't have to worry about that part of it. But at the time, the negotiations between the FOP and the administration over our contract, the mayor at the time was being he really dug his heels in on some things that we felt were just no-brainers. Like, for example, like the bulletproof vest. At the time, the FOP bought us our vests, and the mayor didn't want to have to incur this cost of, I think they were like $1,000 or $1,200 at the time. And he just didn't want to add that added expense at the time. And they're like, you don't have the city carpenters buy their own hammers. You give them the hammers, you give them the tools to use, So anyway.
So let's talk a little bit about your experiences on the job, right? So you come in as a patrol officer,
yes,
and then you work your way up the ranks, and you ultimately retired as a police chief.
I was one of 2 assistant chiefs. We had the administration chief and the operations chief. I was chief of operations, so I was number 2, and I had anything to do with the department operationally, as obviously as the title kind of implies. If there was an incident where, like, if they were going to be serving a high-risk warrant, before we would activate the team, they had to do their threat matrix assessment, and then I had to review it and go over it with the team leader, make sure that it rises to that level and that there's nothing there that would preclude use of either them or certain things that they might have. Like, are we going to use flashbangs, yay or nay? Not to the point of micromanaging them and how they do their job, just making sure that we're not using a hammer to try and drive in a screw, just making sure we're doing the right things the right way.
Yeah. So you had shared with us some stories about some critical incidents that you had responded to, and they made it real difficult for you. Can we get into a little bit about that?
Yeah. Sure. We had 2 back-to-back that really kind of hit me. I think I was a shift lieutenant, if I remember right. Sergeant or lieutenant, one of the 2. And it was early on in a middle shift. So like maybe 1:30 in the afternoon, not usually the type of time that you have like the really crazy stuff going on. And 2 of my guys had been dispatched to a domestic, and they met the woman in the parking lot, and they get the rundown from her, and they're going to go to the house to talk to the other half. She had given them the code. It was one of those key code door locks. So right before they were just about to leave her, and one of them, as an afterthought, turned and looked at her and said, "Does your husband have any guns in the house?" And her reply was something to the effect of, "Not that I know of," or "I'm not sure," or "I don't think so." Something kind of ambivalent. So that already kind of got their interest, just because it was kind of a weird answer. It's not a yes or no. No, we don't have any guns in the house. We have kids. We don't have to, whatever. So they go to the door, and it's a 3-step stoop, and then you're at the door. So the first guy goes up, unlocks the door, knocks, unlocks the door, opens it, hollers in, hears footsteps, but doesn't hear an answer. So he goes in and immediately turns to his left. There's a doorway, and the other officer is still standing down below the stoop, staring up the stairs. The first officer hears the sound of the charging handle of an AR-15 as it's charging the round. Knows that sound. So he steps into that living room, and just that fast, rounds start coming down and just start hammering the wall in between where he is and where Joe Bad Guy is. He actually took a knee and just stuck his hand around and started shooting back up the stairwell. So we're hearing all this come over the radio as they're calling for help and all this other. You can hear all the gunfire in the background over the radio. So at that point, I think me and the entire rest of the department broke all of our policies and procedures when it comes to speed within the city. And we got there. They were so blessed. The extent of their injuries was getting fragments of either wood, metal, some bullet fragments, but no direct strikes, which was just phenomenal. I still can't understand how.
Sometimes God puts his hand down on.
That's exactly right. So
True.
that's exactly what it looked like. When you looked at where the rounds impacted the wall, where he was kneeling, and where they impacted the floor, it was like there was this cone over him. Like again, you can be as atheist as you want until you're in the fighting hole with me, and then everybody believes in God all of a sudden. So the next day, I'm working middle shift again. The night shift lieutenant was off, so I was going to work my shift from 1:30 to 9:30, and then the first half of night shift, and then the day shift lieutenant was going to come in. We were going to split the night shift so that neither one, nobody's getting crushed with the whole thing. So at like 20 after 1 in the morning, I was going to be done at 1:30. It's like 25 after 1, and a call goes out for a stabbing. The lieutenant had just radioed me that he was at the station and I could head in. So I'm making my way there, and when the call goes out, it is literally 2 blocks away from where I'm sitting. There's a domestic in progress with a potential stabbing. I'm like, well, I'm not going to not go to that. I'm right here. So there was another officer that was like same distance away. So we arrived together. And when you go up the stairs to the landing, there is a wall, a door to your left, and a door to the right. The door to the left is the one we wanted, but there is nowhere to go if things go sideways, other than down the stairs, and you're still a target. I mean, there's like I said, there's nowhere to go to get away from it if it starts going bad. So we're banging on the door, the cop knock, the one that rattles the windows. No answer, and we're getting constant feedback about what's going on inside the apartment because Joe Bad Guy called his mom on his cell phone. Mom then called 911 from her landline phone. So she's giving us information as to what's going on. Knocked on the door across the hall. She didn't hear or see anything, which is weird considering what mom is saying is going on in there. Then she says that they have 2 kids. One of my guys out back says that they have the car, both cars are there, and there's car seats in the car. And that's when I looked at the other guy and said, we got to take the door. We got to go. He kicks the door in and immediately says, I got a body. And you could see her legs sticking out from the half wall between the kitchen into the dining room. So he goes right to her. That lieutenant that I told you that was coming in to relieve me, he had just grabbed another car and he was now on the stairs right behind me. So we go in and we start going down this hallway. I peeled off into this bathroom. He peels off into what turned out to be the master bedroom. And I hear him challenge someone. Well, you can clear a bathroom pretty quickly. So my bathroom's empty. I go over to him. He is in the far left corner facing, pointing his gun at the opposite far right, near right corner. So I kind of lean down. I can see there's a doorway there. So I'm assuming that's probably the master bathroom. Another officer came in and he's with the lieutenant. They're challenging this guy, telling him to drop the knife. So I started coming along this wall thinking that if he pops out, maybe I can grab him or who knows what I'm going to do. So I'm about 5 feet from the door, and I thought, well, this close, I don't need to shoot him. They can shoot him if they need to. So I put my gun away, and I just stuck my head around the corner, and he was maybe 4 feet in front of me, maybe. And I tased him, and we were able to arrest him. She was very, very dead. He had been torturing her for quite some time. When he called his mom, so now I'm starting to think, shit, I should have taken this door much sooner. But the listening to the investigators that listened to the tape later, he killed her about 30 seconds before we knocked on the door.
Oh man.
Because mom could hear her calling to her, asking for help, and she's like, she's not dead yet. It's not that bad. We can still fix this. Don't, stop. And he's like, oh, hold on. Mom hears the sound of him cutting her throat. So, but for about a month, I couldn't process any of it. Well, they didn't have all those timelines down yet. The medical examiner didn't have the cause of death and the time of death down yet. So for like a month, I was a mess. Because I kept thinking that she died because I froze because of what had happened the day before.
The second guessing syndrome, right?
Yeah.
It
was horrible. It was horrible.
Can we talk about that a little bit,
Yeah.
David? Let's reflect on some of the stuff we discussed with prior guests on this issue. The repeated trauma, the dealing with it, and then not seeking help or not knowing to seek help, and the impact that it has on the officers, and the fact that now we had a lieutenant, seasoned officer, that's now questioning himself, and that's got to be torturous. What are your thoughts, man?
Yeah, look, the second guessing, it only gets worse. It magnifies, right?
Right.
I mean, until you get some solid answers, which I'm sure came your way ultimately with the investigation, but you're thinking the worst. And listen, soldier, Marine, officer, that's out there on the street, that worth their weight in salt, right? That's there to protect. They're going to be hard on themselves. That's just the way it is. Don't ask me why, I couldn't tell you, but that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Especially in a situation where innocents get killed. What could you have done differently?
Right.
And you torment yourself. It happens. Even in cases not as serious as that. You second guess yourself. What could have been? And that's I'll tell you, when it gets to this level, that's where the assistance needs to come in. Where can you go? Who can you talk to right away to alleviate this? Because it's just perpetual motion. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Did you seek help? I mean, was there counseling? Was there any type of
All right,
service?
so strangely enough, at the time, I was part of our CISM team, the Critical Incident Stress Management team. So I was very keenly aware of all the different effects that trauma can have on you, right? And it's real easy to look at somebody else and say, hey, you know what? You got to pay attention to this. I see this, and this. It's real hard when you go like this, right? So I was keenly aware that I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I wasn't happy about anything. I had withdrawn from and I'm an extrovert, and I stopped talking to, like, when I would go to inspection, there was always going to be something that we're going to have some kind of fun, because if I'm sending all these officers out to do a hard day's work, we're going to start it off on a good note. That stopped. It was just a matter of me regurgitating information that they needed for their shift, and that was it. So I had a few different people reach out to me, saying, "You all right?" "Oh yeah, I'm fine." "Really?" Until finally, somebody, I don't remember who it was that called me. They just said, "Dude, you're not okay. I'm not asking. Let's talk about this." And we did. And I was trying to express that it was my fault because of my hesitation. And he says, "No, John, you did everything the way you were supposed to. The day before, notwithstanding, whether that happened or not, wouldn't have mattered. You still handled it the right way. There was nothing that you were going to do that was going to change that outcome from what he had planned."
Can you share some some of the thoughts and some of the feelings? Describe some of what you were feeling when you were going through this period of what's that?
Loneliness was probably the biggest one. Nobody could possibly understand this because, and how vain is that thought? I'm surrounded by 229 other cops that have their own version of their trauma, and I'm going to sit there and think they'll never understand this. Really? But loneliness, I think, was the biggest one, because I chose not to put myself out there and say, you know what, I'm having a tough time. And then it compounds because, as you know, your brain kind of recharges all your dopamine and stuff when you're sleeping. If you're not sleeping, it's not recharged. So it's this awful cycle. So the biggest thing that I did to try to self-regulate after that was just put myself on a schedule. I would get up at this time. I would eat. Whether I felt like I was hungry or not, I would force myself to have a bowl of cereal, whatever it was. I would eat something. Then I would do something, whatever that was, go to the gym or whatever. I made myself stick to this schedule until I got back to some version of normal. Whether that's a new normal or whether that's my old normal, doesn't matter. I came back to what my normal for now is. And then from there, I could continue to work through it and talk to people about it and get myself back. Get myself back is probably the best way to put it.
Did you experience any thoughts of regret, any feelings of regret? Is that what you're describing?
Yeah.
The questioning?
For sure. Yeah.
Guilt?
Regretting not going through that door faster. Again, that rational side of my brain knows that it wouldn't have mattered. He had already cut her throat. But the emotional side of you, like, well, yeah, but we're supermen. We could have got in there. We could have got her to our paramedics. Our paramedics are like gods. They can save anyone. None of that stuff is real or true, but that's how we like to perceive them, because if anything happens to me, I want to think that they are some kind of god,
Yeah.
But
Regret or guilt?
Guilt, I think,
Guilt.
is probably a better one.
Guilt.
I think that's probably, yeah. I think guilt's probably better.
So let me ask you this: you shared 2 back-to-back episodes of high liability, high stress, traumatic, day apart from each other. Let's talk about that reality in today's society, and the police officers and the military personnel who are continuously exposed to trauma and the impact. What's your experience with that?
We have seen the gamut of anything from people that are handling it well and handling it appropriately, to others that engage in self-destructive behavior, whether that is drinking, excessive going to the gym, using things to enhance things while they're in the gym, pick it up, because they need to see themselves as a certain kind of way. Any type of destructive womanizing, or what would be the opposite? Manizing?
Risky behavior, right?
Yeah. Just destructive behavior to their happy life.
Extreme behavior.
Yeah.
Extreme behavior.
So we had, our CISM team was very strong when I was there, and from what I've been seeing and hearing, it's only getting better under the guidance of the people that are still there. Am I allowed to say his name? Ben?
What's that? Ben
Am I
Yelp?
allowed to can I mention Ben?
Yeah, of course.
All right, so Ben Yobst and I have been friends for a long time, and he's carrying on with what we started with CISM, and he's taken it to the next level. I'm so proud and impressed by that man.
He's another American hero.
Yeah,
He's
for sure.
hero.
I pale in comparison to him, honestly. I am so in awe of him and so blessed to count him as a friend.
But reflecting on the work that Ben is doing,
Right.
and work that you've done.
So a lot of the stuff that when we were doing the CISM, what we were focusing on was what to do after. So you send them through the academy and you get them all geared up. You're going to do this. You're here to help people. You're here to save lives. You're going to go do good in the world. But bad stuff still happens. So we then would try to help them cope with that after. Ben has taken it to the next step where he's trying to inoculate them a little bit on the front end, or vaccinate them, whichever, on by telling them what realistically you can expect in this line of work. You are going to have a front row seat to the greatest show on earth, and there's going to be some pretty scary scenes. Just understand that, recognize what you might be experiencing, and talk to people about it. Don't try to keep it in. Stress is going to find some way out somehow, whether it manifests itself psychologically or physically. It is going to find its way out. And if you don't manage it, it will manage you, and it's not going to work out well for you. From the classes that he and I taught together, they seemed like they were very, very well received. The advantage that we had a lot of times there were guys from Allentown that were going through the guys and gals that were going through the class, as well as officers from other departments. And you would see them talking amongst each other after, on breaks and stuff. And those officers are validating everything that we're saying to them and the value to it. And that was why they were then going through that class. To me, that was the best compliment that they could have as to the value to the program that we had in place and that Ben is now improving upon.
Do you see that broadly being picked up across the country in the law enforcement community? Do you?
I think so.
What about you?
More so than it has been.
More so than it had been, for sure.
Yeah,
sure. Yeah. Go on, I think, are the days of, we'll meet at the bar, I'll buy you a beer, and we'll get over it, kid. I think they realized that wasn't the healthiest way to do it. And I think there's a better understanding. I mean, the Marine Corps, when we got home, they told us, hey, you guys probably saw some things and you probably processed it a certain kind of way using humor, which we did. I mean, there were all kinds of dumb stuff we did. They said, just be careful about your audience. They might not be able to process that the same. And I'm thinking, my family knows how messed up I am. We'll be fine. I was wrong. That was the extent of their debriefing, our psychological debriefing after that. Yeah, I was wrong. We said and did dumb stuff that they weren't ready to see that either. But then they hadn't been living in that environment either. So it wasn't fair to them to expect them to understand it.
I want to ask both of you guys a reflective question. For you, John, what advice would you give any of our brothers and sisters that are out there, they're suffering, that need help, that find themselves like they feel like they're alone, which they're not
alone. There's a reason it's called the brotherhood, the fraternity. And I realize that sounds very misogynistic, and I apologize to every woman out there who wears a badge.
Sisterhood.
Yeah. It's a family. And I have embraced that family because they've been there even when my personal family fell apart. My blue family was always there. And yeah, they might kick you when you're down, but it's because they love you. It's when they stop talking to you that you got to worry. So don't be afraid to lean on each other. You lean on each other when you go through a door facing an unknown threat. Why would you not then, in your lowest moment, lean on that same person that you've leaned on every other time? All right, here's my little philosophical quote. To me, it is not a sign of weakness to seek help. It is a sign of strength to say, you know what? I'm having trouble with this. Can you help me? It's no different than having a friend come over and help you with an accident report. Hey, you know what? I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? Okay, so you can do that. They'll talk about every physical malady that's wrong. I knew more about what was going on in their physical bodies, but yet for some reason they wouldn't want to talk about what was going on between their ears. So let's maybe talk about brain health instead of mental health. That was a big change that we had changed. It was just how we referred to things.
I used to tell my troops, and I used to always, as I often do in writing and speaking, boxing metaphors because of my love for the sport. Right?
Mm-hmm.
In police work, no matter how great you train, when you're in that ring, you are going to get hit. You're going to get hit. Now, how it affects you is based on your training.
Mm-hmm.
But don't think for a minute, and comparing it to policing, that even if you're a pencil pusher that hasn't done anything tactically, that you may not get dispatched to a scene where there's kids that were murdered, or a traffic accident that's horrific, and it sticks with you. You are going to get hit in this profession, in this profession of law enforcement. It's how you deal with it. And when you mention about talking or being able to talk speak out, because people can't read minds.
Right.
They may say, hey, what's wrong with you? Are you okay? But they can't read what's inside you. It's not a problem. And listen, we all tell war stories, right? So what's a story if the war is within you to tell what's going on and to get the guidance
Right.
in the early rounds?
Right.
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 You know, it's
That's really good. I like that.
no, it's on point. It's truly on point. And the irony here is, as I started out the show asking, who doesn't like a good war story, right? What the piece I think that's left out is hey man, it hurt me.
Yeah.
I need help. I'm struggling.
Yeah.
And that's something that we would like to convey more to the public.
People want to hear things that we, military law enforcement, often want to forget about.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So
And that's why parties a lot of times were hard. You know, family gatherings or parties with friends that you had before law enforcement, which a lot of them you don't after you're in it for a few years. They want to hear all about all this cool, juicy stuff. And to your point, I'm fighting to forget about it. I don't want to open that box again because that sucked. And they want to hear about it because they didn't have to see it and smell it and feel it. And
yeah.
Good point.
I totally congratulate you on reaching retirement.
Thank you,
I
sir.
thank you for your military service. I think we can both thank you.
Absolutely.
You know,
very
I like to probably do a show on thinking about it. You know, this whole issue of we trying to forget what others want to learn about us because it's hurting us. But on that note, we've run out of time. This has been an impactful show, I believe, with retired Assistant Chief John Hill, my partner, co-host David Magnusson, producer behind the scene Rachelle Brummage, to the Miller brothers, Michael and Grant Miller, to the Miami's Community News team, to you, the audience, we can't thank you enough. Drop us a line. Find us on YouTube under Vets and Badges, all social media platforms under the same, or vetsandbadges.com. It's a new website that's coming out. Love to continue the conversation. Love for you to drop us a line. Let us know what you're thinking of the shows. Thank you, John. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me. I
Thank you,
enjoyed
John.
it.